The blood was the first thing I saw, so dark against the pure white snow, spreading like a poisoned promise. A promise that tonight, the reign of Valerius Blackwood, the unbreakable Alpha King, would finally end. He crashed against the splintered stump of a great oak, the impact shuddering through the silent, silver-scorched forest. The sound of his ribs cracking was louder than the howling wind. 5 wolves circled him, not rogues. That was the true poison in this scene. They were his own. Enforcers he had trained, betas he had trusted with his life. I watched from the shadows, my heart a frantic, trapped bird against my ribs. Marcus, his lead enforcer, stepped forward, a silver dagger glowing faintly in the moonlight. "Still breathing, Your Majesty?" The mockery in his voice was a sharper blade than the one in his hand. Valerius dragged his gaze upward. Golden eyes, dimmed by pain and silver toxin, burned with a fury that could start wildfires. He spat blood onto the snow between them. "You think 5 of you is enough?" "We only needed 1, Marcus smiled. "A cold, dead thing. We just needed you alone, isolated, believing a lie written in your own beta's hand." He gestured to the forged border alert. "The rest is just cleanup." I felt it then, a pull, a deep, resonant tug in my very soul that I had spent 15 years silencing. It screamed at me to move, to intervene, but fear, my oldest companion, held me frozen. I was Lyra, the mute Omega, the ghost on the edges of the Blackwood territory, seen but never noticed, tolerated but never welcomed. To step into that clearing was to step into a world that had only ever given me pain. Valerius tried to push himself up, his muscles straining against the silver sapping his strength. His wolf was trapped, caged by poison, and I could feel its desperate rage through a connection that had no right to exist. "Mate," my own wolf whimpered inside me. "Mate." I crushed the feeling. It was a fantasy, a cruel trick of a desperate mind. Alphas did not have mates among the broken. Yet, as Marcus lunged, the silver blade aimed for Valerius's heart, my body moved without my permission. Silent as the falling snow, I emerged from the pines. I did not roar, I did not snarl. My attack was a whisper of deadly motion. My palm struck Marcus's wrist, and the silver dagger spiraled into the dark. My elbow drove into his throat before he could gasp. He stumbled back, choking, his eyes wide with shock, not at the attack, but at the attacker. Me. The other 4 whirled, their confusion a tangible scent in the air. For a moment, the entire forest held its breath. The Alpha King, bleeding in the snow, his treacherous enforcers poised to kill, and between them, a small, silent Omega girl who had never so much as looked anyone in the eye. Then chaos erupted. They came at me as one. Trained warriors against a girl who couldn't even scream. But they had trained for strength, for domination. I had learned for survival. Every day of my 15 years of silence had been a lesson in reading movement, in predicting violence before it bloomed. Rafe came first, fast and angry. I dropped low, sweeping his legs. He fell hard, and I was already moving. Another lunged from the left. I used his momentum, pulling him into the path of the third. They collided with a sickening crunch of bone and furious snarls. I fought like the forest itself, flowing, adapting, striking where they were weakest. My claws were short but sharp as obsidian. I raked them across a wolf's eyes. His howl of pain was my only soundtrack. I moved to the next, a dance of evasion and precise, brutal strikes. I was not trying to kill. I was trying to disable, to protect. Through the haze of the fight, I felt Valerius's eyes on me. His gaze was a physical weight, heavy with shock, with pain, and with something else I dared not name. It threatened to unravel the careful control I wore like a second skin. Finally, it was over. 4 wolves lay moaning in the snow, wounded, disarmed. Marcus was crawling away, one hand clutching his ruined throat. The silence returned, deeper now, filled with the scent of blood and broken loyalty. I stood in the center of it all, my chest heaving, my hands trembling, not from exertion, but from terror. I had just exposed myself. I had broken the most sacred rule of my existence. Stay invisible, stay silent, stay safe. Slowly, I turned to Valerius. He was watching me, his golden eyes capturing mine. In them, I saw no pity, no disgust, just a profound, earth-shattering confusion and a question. Why? The words scraped from his throat, raw and broken. I could not answer. I could only cross the distance between us, the snow crunching softly under my feet. I knelt before him, my eyes scanning the horrific wound on his shoulder. The silver-laced gash was deep, pulsing with a poison that was slowly claiming him. My hands hovered over it. They trembled violently. I was terrified, not of the battle I'd just fought, but of this, of touching him, of the earthquake that simple contact might trigger inside my soul. He saw my fear, his brow furrowed. "Who are you?" he whispered. I closed my eyes for a second, gathering the shattered pieces of my courage. Then I did the only thing I could. I reached out, and with the gentlest touch I possessed, I pressed my fingers to the edges of his wound. A jolt went through us both, like lightning finding the earth. The mate bond, dormant and ignored, flared to life with an intensity that stole my breath. I saw his eyes widen, felt his heart stutter in response. He knew. The Alpha King, bleeding in the snow, knew I was his destined mate, and the horror of that truth was greater than any silver blade. He tried to speak again, but I shook my head, pressing a finger to my own lips. Quiet. Understanding dawned in his pained eyes, the mute Omega. He knew the rumors, the girl without a voice. He just never imagined she would be this. With frantic movements, I tore a strip of clean cloth from the hem of my tunic. I had to stop the bleeding, slow the silver. My touch was clinical, efficient, a skill learned from tending to my own hidden wounds in the dark. As I worked, I could feel his gaze on my face, studying me as if I were a text written in a forgotten language. "We have to move," he grunted, trying again to rise. "They'll have sentries. More will come." I nodded. I helped him to his feet, his large frame leaning heavily on my smaller one. The strength required surprised us both. I was an Omega, supposed to be weak, yet I bore his weight without buckling. Another secret revealed. We stumbled into the deeper woods, away from the clearing of betrayal. I led him to a place I knew, a hidden cave behind a frozen waterfall, a sanctuary I had discovered long ago. Inside, the air was still and cold. I helped him sit against the stone wall, his breathing labored. The silver poison was the real enemy. It was a slow, creeping death for our kind, preventing his wolf from healing him. I had seen it before. I knew only one thing that could counter it, and it was a secret more dangerous than my fighting skills. I met his eyes in the dim light. I pointed to his wound, then to my own wrist. I shook my head, my expression pleading for him to understand. He frowned. "No, I won't take your blood, Lyra." He knew my name. He had remembered the ghost's name. I insisted, my gestures growing more urgent. It wasn't just blood. It was the only chance. With a final, desperate look, I bit my own wrist. The pain was sharp, clean. Before he could protest again, I pressed the bleeding wound to his lips. The effect was instantaneous. His body went rigid. His eyes flew open, blazing with a gold so bright it illuminated the cave. My blood, it wasn't normal. It carried the echo of an ancient power, a legacy I was sworn to suppress. It fought the silver, pushing it back, granting his wolf a momentary surge of strength. He pulled away, staring at me with awe and dawning horror. "What are you?" he breathed. I wrapped my wrists, avoiding his gaze. I couldn't answer that. Not with gestures, not with looks. The truth was a lock with no key. He reached out, his hand surprisingly gentle, and turned my face towards him. "Who did this to you? Who made you swear this silence?" Tears, hot and shameful, welled in my eyes. I looked away, toward the cave entrance, toward the packlands that had been my gilded cage. He followed my gaze, and his jaw tightened. Understanding, cruel and clear, settled on his features. "It was someone in the pack," he said, his voice a low growl. "This wasn't an accident. Your silence, it's a prison." A single tear traced a path down my cheek. It was the only confirmation I could give. Yes, my silence was a vow, a prison built by the very people he led. And in saving him tonight, I might have just shattered its walls for good. We didn't have long. The sound of approaching wolves moving with purpose reached our ears. Many wolves. Valerius struggled to stand, the temporary boost from my blood already fading. "Dominic," he muttered, the name tasting like ash. His beta, his brother in all but blood. The cave entrance darkened. Dominic Thorne stood there, flanked by 10 pack warriors. He looked every bit the concerned second in command, his face a mask of relief that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. "Valerius? Moon's Grace, you're alive!" He stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over me with a dismissive flicker that turned to sharp scrutiny. "Lyra? The Omega? What is she doing here?" "She saved my life," Valerius said, his voice weak but firm. "Marcus and the others betrayed us. They tried to kill me." Dominic's mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing not shock but annoyance. He recovered quickly. A grave accusation, and convenient that the one witness is a girl who cannot speak to confirm it. His eyes narrowed at me. "How did you even know the Alpha was here, little one? You never stray from the eastern thicket." The implication hung in the air, poisonous. Was I part of it? A lure? Valerius growled, a low, dangerous sound. "Do not question her loyalty. She fought them off alone." Did she? Dominic's smile was thin. An Omega defeating 5 trained enforcers? That's not loyalty, Valerius. That's something unnatural. He took a step closer, his focus entirely on me now. "What are you hiding, child? Why is a mute Omega so strong?" I shrank back, the old fears rising like a tide. This was it, the exposure I had dreaded. Dominic's scent was wrong. It carried the subtle, bitter note of silver and deceit. "Stand down, Dominic," Valerius commanded, pushing himself to stand fully, putting his body slightly in front of mine. The protective gesture sent a strange warmth through my icy fear. "I am trying to protect this pack." Dominic's voice rose, finally shedding its pretense. "You bring this creature into our heart, and you expect us not to question? Look at her, Valerius. Really look. She is not what she seems." "He's right," another voice said from the entrance. An elder, Corvin, stepped into the cave. Others followed, members of the pack council. Dominic had not come just with warriors, but with judges. We felt a disturbance, a surge of old, forbidden magic. It led us here, to her. All eyes turned to me, accusing, afraid. I was the disturbance, the forbidden thing. Valerius looked from Dominic's triumphant face to the council's grave ones, and finally to me. In my eyes, he saw the truth I couldn't speak. Dominic was the traitor. This was a coup, and I was the perfect pawn to use to shatter Valerius's authority. "You planned this," Valerius said to Dominic, his voice dangerously quiet. "You sent Marcus. You knew about Lyra. What are you to him? A weapon?" A weapon? Dominic laughed. No, my friend, she's a curse, and you, by bonding with her, have doomed us all. The word bonding rippled through the council members. They stared at Valerius and me, seeing the invisible tether they had only suspected. Shock turned to outrage. Dominic pressed his advantage. The mute Omega is a vessel, a prison for an ancient evil the moon goddess herself sealed away. Her silence is the lock, and your mate bond, he pointed a trembling finger, his performance masterful. That is the key. You have begun to unlock a horror that will consume every wolf alive. Lies, twisted truths. Panic exploded in the cave. The council members backed away, drawing weapons. I looked at Valerius, my eyes wide with desperation. It's not true, not like that. But the seed of doubt was planted. Valerius looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a crack in his certainty. Not rejection, but a deep, painful confusion. He had felt the bond. He had tasted my strange blood. He knew I was hiding a monumental truth. And in that moment, Dominic struck. Seize the Omega for the safety of the pack. The warriors moved. Valerius moved faster. Wounded, poisoned, he placed himself squarely between them and me, a final, unbreakable wall. Run, Lyra, he said to me, his voice a raw, private command. I shook my head violently, clutching his arm. I wouldn't leave him. He pried my hand off, his touch both gentle and final. You must, for both of us. Now, go. He turned and charged the advancing warriors, a roar of defiance tearing from his throat, a king making his last stand to buy his queen's escape. With a silent sob tearing at my soul, I turned and fled deeper into the dark caves, the sounds of combat echoing behind me, Dominic's victorious snarl chasing me into the shadows. The game was set, the king was in check, and I, the silent pawn, had to find a way to become the queen. The cave system was a labyrinth of ancient stone and echoing silence. I ran until my lungs burned and the sounds of battle faded into the drip of water and the beat of my own terrified heart. I collapsed against a cold wall, sliding to the ground, wrapping my arms around my knees. What had I done? In trying to save him, I had given Dominic the perfect weapon. I was the curse, the vessel. The bond was real. That terrifying, beautiful connection to Valerius was undeniable. But it wasn't a key to evil, was it? Dominic's words twisted in my mind. A prison for an ancient evil. My mother's frantic, silent warnings from a childhood I could barely remember. The solemn elders who would visit our isolated hut, looking at me with pity and fear. The absolute, non-negotiable rule, never speak. Your voice is the trigger. I had always believed my silence was a punishment for some inherent flaw, a weakness. What if it was a duty, a terrible, sacred duty? I had to know. Valerius was buying me time with his life. I could not waste it on tears. I stood, wiping my face. The cave I was in was not natural. The walls were too smooth, the floor too level. Faint etchings, obscured by moss and age, were carved into the stone. I approached, brushing my fingers over them. As I touched the stone, a faint silvery light awakened in the grooves. The etchings glowed, revealing a story in pictures and symbols older than the black wood pack. It showed a magnificent wolf, its fur like woven starlight, standing beside a radiant woman, the moon goddess. They were happy, partners. Then other figures, shrouded in jealousy, whispered to the goddess. The next image was one of betrayal. The goddess, face twisted in rage, was tearing the star wolf's essence apart, not killing him, shattering him. The final panels showed the goddess weeping, holding the fractured pieces. She placed them into human-like vessels. The first vessel was a woman with her hand over her mouth, a command for silence. My breath hitched. This was it, the true history. This shadow wolf was not a mindless evil. He was the goddess's betrayed mate. His punishment was eternal fragmentation. And my bloodline, we were the guardians of the pieces. Our silence kept the fragments dormant, separate. We weren't a curse. We were a mercy, a way to keep him alive but contained, because the goddess, in her wrathful grief, could not bear to destroy him completely. But a mate bond, a bond of pure, chosen love, that could act as a bridge. It could allow the fragments to sense each other, to call to each other, to begin to reunite. That's what Dominic feared, not an evil rising, but a powerful, wronged entity becoming whole and seeking justice. And Valerius and I, we had forged that bridge. A deep, resonant voice echoed in the chamber, not through the air, but directly in my mind. "You begin to understand, little guardian." I spun, but saw no one. The voice was ancient, weary, layered with a sorrow as deep as the stone around me. "I am the one they fear, the shadow, the shattered. For 300 years I have slept in your blood, in your mother's blood, and her mother's before." I pressed my hands to my temples. This was madness. "It is the truth. Your vow of silence was my cage, but also my protection. It kept the jealous ones, the descendants of those who poisoned my love's mind, from finding and destroying me completely. Dominic's line are the jailers. They have twisted the story, made me a monster to justify their control." I thought of Dominic's eyes, not the fear of a protector, but the greed of a warden guarding his most powerful prisoner. "Valerius's bond to you has awakened me, not to rage, to hope. He is a true alpha, a just heart. The bridge he built is one of honor, not of corruption. But Dominic will use it to convince the pack you must both be destroyed." What do I do? I thought the question desperately. "You must choose, Lyra. You can reaffirm your vow, sever the bond. It will shatter Valerius's heart and return me to slumber. Or you can complete the bridge, help me become whole. But if I become whole, the bond, the magical tether between you and your alpha, will break. It was never meant to sustain my full presence. You will be free of it, and of me." My world tilted. Sever the bond and save the pack, but condemn Valerius to a life of hollow loss and leave the shadow in his painful prison. Or complete the bridge, free the shadow, and lose the most beautiful, terrifying feeling I had ever known. "There is a third path," the voice whispered, fainter now. "The path of courage. Find my heart, the core of me, the piece the goddess hid most deeply. It is in the Alpha's den, in the vault of Valerius's father. Return it to me. With a heart, I can stabilize. The bond may weaken, but it need not break. You and Valerius may keep your connection. But to find it, you must go back, into the wolf's den, while they are hunting you." The glow from the walls faded, leaving me in near darkness. The choice was mine. A path of sacrifice, a path of loss, or an impossible danger. From the tunnels behind me, I heard the distant baying of hounds. Dominic was not leaving my escape to chance. He was hunting the ghost. I had no more time. I had to move. And I knew, with a certainty that settled in my bones, which path I would take. I would fight for both of them, for Valerius and for the wronged soul inside me. I would go back, I would find the heart, and I would force fate to give us a better ending. Pushing myself up, I moved toward the cave's deepest, darkest passage, the one that, according to the old maps in my mind, led straight into the foundations of the Alpha's own home. The tunnel was a throat of darkness, swallowing me whole. The air grew colder, damper, carrying the scent of wet stone and something else, the faint familiar aroma of packed earth, hearth smoke, and wolf. I was moving beneath the territory, into the very belly of the Blackwood stronghold. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat of terror that echoed in the silent passage. Every sense was stretched taut. I listened for the scuffle of paws above, the murmur of voices through ventilation shafts, the creak of floorboards. The pack would be in an uproar. Their alpha was imprisoned by his beta under charges of treason, consorting with a cursed vessel. And I, the vessel, was at large. They would be searching the forests, the borders. They would not think to look here, in the ancient, forgotten ways that predated their stone halls. My mother had shown me these passages. In the dead of night, with only candlelight, she would trace the routes on crumbling parchment, her eyes wide with a fear she could never voice. "Our escape," she would mouth, her hands trembling. "If the jailers ever come." I thought she meant rogues or invaders. I never understood she meant our own pack. The memory of her face, pale and drawn, fueled my resolve. She had lived and died in silent service to a secret she barely understood. I would not let that be my fate. I would not let Valerius share it. After what felt like an eternity of groping through the dark, a sliver of gray light appeared ahead. A grate set high in a wall, covered in thick cobwebs. I moved towards it, my steps silent on the stone. Peering through the webs, I found myself looking into a vast, shadowy cellar. Storage barrels, old hunting trophies, and rows of dusty wine racks stretched into the gloom. And directly across from me, set into the far wall, was a heavy iron door, banded with silver. The Alpha's vault. My breath caught. It was real. The heart was there, just beyond that door. But between me and it, the cellar was not empty. 2 guards, young enforcers I recognized from training yards, lounged on barrels near the base of a stone staircase that led up into the main house. They were talking in low, tense voices. "Said she's like a ghost. Took down Marcus and his whole team." "Don't be stupid. She's an Omega. Dominic says she used forbidden magic, trickery." "Maybe, but the Alpha believed her. He fought for her. That's why he's in the cells. You really think Valerius would betray the pack?" A heavy silence. I don't know what to think anymore. Dominic has the council's ear. He says the bond has poisoned his mind. And if it has, what do? We follow orders. We guard this door. Nothing gets in or out. That's our duty. My duty was on the other side of that door. I watched them, calculating. They were nervous, conflicted. They were not Dominic's loyal killers. They were confused pack members following the chain of command. I could not fight them. Any noise would bring the entire house down upon me. I needed a distraction. My eyes scanned the cellar. An old half-empty sack of grain leaned against a wall near the guards. A few fat, sleek rats scurried along the baseboards, drawn by the scent. An idea, fragile and desperate, formed in my mind. Retreating slightly into the tunnel, I felt along the damp wall until my fingers closed over a loose, palm-sized stone. I aimed not for the guards, but for a cluster of ceramic jars on a high shelf to the far left of the vault door. I threw. The stone flew true, striking the shelf with a sharp crack. The jars wobbled, then one tipped, crashing to the stone floor in an explosion of pottery and dried herbs. The 2 guards jerked to their feet, swords half drawn. What was that? Rats, probably. Big ones. Check it out. As they moved cautiously towards the noise, their backs to the tunnel grate, I moved. I pushed against the old iron. It gave with a rusty shriek that sounded deafening in the stillness. I froze, my blood turning to ice. The guards spun. For a second, we stared at each other across the shadowy cellar. They saw a small, ragged figure clambering from a wall they didn't know existed. I saw their shock harden into recognition, then into duty. "The Omega, she's here!" They charged. There was no time for grace, for strategy. This was pure panic. I dropped to the floor as the first guard lunged, his sword whistling over my head. I rolled, coming up behind him, and drove the heel of my hand into the back of his knee. He cried out, stumbling. The second was already on me, his fist aimed at my temple. I ducked inside his swing, the force of his missed punch spinning him slightly. I used his momentum, shoving him hard towards his recovering partner. They collided in a tangle of limbs and curses. It was the only opening I would get. I didn't look back. I sprinted for the vault door. It was locked, of course, a massive, intricate mechanism of iron and silver. My hands flew over it, desperation making my fingers clumsy. I had no key, no tools. Behind me, the guards were untangling themselves, their shouts growing louder. Think, Lyra, the shadow's presence inside me was a quiet hum, not intervening, but watching. This was my test. My gaze fell on the silver banding. Silver was poison to wolves, but it was also a conductor of magic. Our magic, the old magic of guardians and vessels. Without allowing myself to doubt, I bit my thumb again, drawing a bead of blood. I smeared it across the silver lock. For a terrible second, nothing happened. Then the silver began to glow with a faint, ethereal blue light. The intricate gears within the lock whirred and clicked, tumbling over themselves. With a final heavy thunk, the doors swung inward an inch. I shoved it open and slipped inside, heaving it closed behind me just as the guards slammed at it from the outside. The thick iron held, but their pounding fists and furious shouts were a constant thunder. I was in, but I had just alerted the entire house that the ghost was in the walls.